everybody, and this morning I'm being interviewed by Shabnam, who's got some questions to ask me. So I'm curious, what do you want to ask me?
Okay, thanks Keith. My first question is, do you think food, to consume any kind of food, improves psychic abilities?
Well, that's a surprising question. So it's about food which would be appropriate for improving psychic abilities, right? Gosh, that's a really surprising, unexpected question. So let me think about it. So so what I would go straight towards raw food. Increasing the raw food in the diet is going to increase psychic abilities, and also eating foods, specifically pomegranates I'm being given, but the fruit, tropical fruit in general, but pomegranates especially, would be really suitable for this. Think of them as jewels. That's the way that I'm being asked to provide that image for you to see. But raw food in general, and also the algae, the blue-green algae, the spirulina and the chlorella would be helpful too. I'm also being given that bee pollen would be appropriate too, and to regard honey as a spiritual food in this sense. So these are all foods which lighten the body. So it's really not animal food, and it's not cooked food, but raw food, fruits particularly. That's what I'm being given. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question is a bit on the physics side. I would like to know, or if you can answer, if black holes, what you think they are and their purpose.
Black holes, right. From my perspective, a black hole is a dimensional portal which takes you out of this particular 3D reality into other dimensions. Yeah, for me that's what a black hole is. It's definitely a portal. And it's quite logical that physicists, conventional physicists who are very much enmeshed in the third dimension and frightened of looking beyond, would regard black holes to be event horizons with catastrophic consequences. Because if you're purely third dimensional, it will be a catastrophic thing to be projected into a black hole. But as a multidimensional space-time traveller, to be projected into a black hole will be a wonderful gift.
Okay, what do you think is on the other side of the black hole?
This really brings us up to a much bigger subject, and it reminds me of something that happened to me when I was imbibing the monatomic gold, also called the ormus. So I'd had a number of experiences of ormus, but at this particular point I was curious about the wider reality beyond the 3D reality, and also beyond the other dimensions that we could go to. I wanted to know what would be beyond, and I took some of the gold and I was instructed to go to bed, which I did, and as I lay there in bed and was just drifting quite casually with my thoughts, and suddenly I was presented with this image. Now, if we use one of the apps you can get on iPads, for example, where you see the cosmos and the stars and the universe and the galaxies, what you get is you get this image of a black sphere which is populated by dots, and each dot is a galaxy, and there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of galaxies. That's what we get told. This is the image that I've had in my consciousness for some time. When I took the gold, I got projected out of this universe into the wider reality, and I saw something which was quite shocking to me, but also incredibly exciting, because what I could see is I could see the light, the pure white light of what you call the Godhead, consciousness, whatever, and it was populated by little black dots, and each black dot was a universe. So the whole thing reversed itself. So in as much as our universe, which is a blackness of space, is filled with white dots, each of which is a galaxy, each one containing hundreds of billions of stars, when you travel into the wider reality you see exactly the opposite, that it is all the light, the Godhead consciousness. It's all light, and each little tiny little pinpoint of blackness is the entire universe. That's what I was shown.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you for answering that. Now, something completely different to that is your opinions on Kundalini energy and its place in shamanism.
Right, that's another very surprising question for me. So I would relate. I was first of all, I was starting to talk about it from my limited understanding of Eastern spirituality, which is that I have been informed that Kundalini energy is a serpent power, and this is an energy which, when it is activated, rises up from the base of the spine all the way up, connecting up all the energy centers and actually connecting with the crown chakra. So that's my basic understanding from a limited perspective of that. From my point of view, from the shamanic perspective, I would say that Kundalini energy is all about the full awakening into your full personal power as a multidimensional space-time traveler. So a being that is fully connected to the multiverse, to use Terry Pratchett's wonderful phrase, is a person in whom the energy flows and the life flows. And then I want to go into the concept of Kundalini, relating it to snake and serpent energy, because the serpent is one of the fundamental forms that we understand to describe life, vibrancy, energy, and to me it relates to DNA. So I see a connection with all this, with the Kundalini, with the DNA, which relates back to the previous question of the monatomic gold, because the monatomic gold activates the DNA. So to me, this relates to the DNA, and the DNA is literally what gives us life. I don't feel I've been very clear about that, but that's all I'm being given at this time.
Okay. Just wanted to know your perspective of God, Source, the Holy Spirit, and the differences between these.
Oh gosh, right, the biggest question for last. Right. So when I have to answer this in a rather strange way, I have to jump around. So when you mention the Holy Spirit, I was brought up in the Christian tradition, and the Christians see the Holy Spirit as a form of active intelligence. It's like the Godhead turned into a form of active intelligence. That's what I remember from that particular discipline, which I got exposed to very much as a child. For me, well, I'm going to go to the Nicene Creed from Christianity. We actually say God of God, light of light, very God of very God. That's actually what Christians say. Strange. So there's a connection immediately between God and light. So God and light are very inextricably linked from my background. So my personal opinion is that light and love and energy are all manifestations of the Godhead. And when I talk about the Source, when I left behind everything that I could conceive of and was projected out of it into the wider reality under the influence of the monatomic gold, briefly, that's what it was. Everything was light. And I realized, for me, I guess the word that resonates most strongly for me is the word the Source. That's what I say. I say the Source. So for me, God is the Source, and God is light. God is everything. And what God has an impulse, and God has an impulse to experience. And one of the ways that God does this is by inhabiting tiny little monads, and each tiny little monad, like me or you or a bacteria or an elephant or a planet, these tiny little monads have all got their own consciousness, and they get born into existence because God projects them out of the Source to have experience. And that experience might be a matter of seconds in the case of a very transient life form, or might be in the form of many millennia in terms of a planet or even a solar system. To me, that would be an emanation of the Source, which then goes and has its experiences, whatever they are, and then at some point, supposing it's a big bang, becomes a big return back into itself, then there's the concept of returning to Source. So again, I don't feel I answered that very precisely. That's the best I can come up with. I really appreciate these questions, and thank you very much. I'm told we shouldn't do any more than that, because that was... Whew.